YouTube is on mute, I
If
think.
you're confused about whether or not to buy a home, you're not alone. About half of people will tell you if you buy now, you'll regret it. And the other half of people tell you if you're going to buy now that you're going to miss out. So, which is it? And that's what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, so why is there so much confusion in the market right now? There's so many things that we're hearing from the mortgage side, the inventory side, the realtor side. So we really want to talk about all of those things today as to, is it really a good time to buy, or should you sit on the sidelines a little bit longer?
Yeah, and the interesting thing, I think that buying a home now has become almost like a game, right? Like before, people would just buy a home. Like I talk to people all the time that are, say, 20 years older than us, and they're like, oh, yeah, we bought our first home here, and then we bought another home there. But homes are like less expensive. And now people are more knowledgeable, and 2008 did happen. And I do think people worry, like, if I buy and prices go down, what happens? And in certain states like Arizona, a lot of those people are the home buyers now's parents that got into that mess in the first place. So I think there is a lot of fear along buying a home and the price dropping significantly.
Yeah. And that only matters if you're going to go and sell the home or if you need to get out of it. But if you're going to be in a place a long time, you really don't have to worry about what your value is doing from day to day or month to month.
Well, and I think what it is people, they want to get the best deal because they're already bending their budget. It's cheaper in most markets right now to rent than to buy as far as a monthly payment goes. And, they just think like, okay, what if I buy this, $600,000 house now and then it's, $450,000 in 2 years? I should have just waited, and I think that is the fear that is trending with especially first time buyers. I see it the most with first time buyers because they don't have any skin in the game. So like, if you already own a home, you're like, well, if prices go down significantly, so does my home that I'm in. So it's fine that I'm selling my $500,000 home and buying an $800,000 one because, you're getting the benefit of the equity you built up already. But it's these first time buyers, I think, that is affecting the most.
Well, yeah. And then these headlines come out, and especially first-time home buyers are maybe going to be paying a little bit more attention than somebody that's going to be trading up or trading down. These headlines come out and they're on a national scale. So it's like housing market's going to crash. Well, real estate is so local. Like you have to pay attention to what's going on in your local and regional market. And that's why sometimes these headlines, they use scare tactics for a reason, but it's like really dial in to your local area is so important.
What's funny is like Ken and I were talking about this, now, you have YouTube and all the headlines, any kind of positive headline does not get as many clicks as like a negative headline. So I believe that's why there's so many crash videos out there. But you have to think about 2007. 2007, if social media were happening today, it would be all about how the market was going to go up and it was going to go up and it's a great time to buy and everyone's doing it. And this is how I'm making, this is how I'm gaining, 200 grand in equity in 2 years by buying a house and then selling it. And, all of those things, right? But now, just because everyone's saying the market's going to crash, you really have to look at the fundamentals. And I do think first-time buyers are missing out because if you look at first-time buyers, it's only 20% of buyers in 2025 were first-time buyers. A typical market, it's closer to 40%.
Mm-hmm. And I was just looking at NAR statistics earlier today, actually, the National Association of Realtors, and pendings are up. I believe pendings are up 1.8%, and home sales are up 1.2% over the last month. So even though we're heading into the winter months and all of these headlines, one of the headlines I saw was housing market is in a deep freeze. Well, the statistics really aren't showing quite that. They're up a little bit. So knowing where your sources are and paying attention.
Well, and also the fact that they're up going into holiday season, because I know like for some markets like Phoenix, yes, we're kind of busier August, September, October, but then we slow down normally a lot November and December. But that's not what we're seeing this year. And it's not what we saw last year either, right? Like we're picking up and we're ramping up. And we keep saying, I was working with an investor this weekend. She went and bought a house. And essentially what she was saying was, in her market in Texas, like April until like July were really frozen. And I'm like, well, that's really funny because that's what I saw in Phoenix, which is usually a really busy time for us. Like that April, May, June was completely dead. And then in August, we started to pick up. And she said, I think that those are the times you could have got the best deals. And I agree. Like those were the times where, my buyers were getting 3% concessions and a discounted price. I don't know about your market, but now concessions are rare in the market that I deal in Phoenix. I mean, I haven't seen concessions in a long time. I've seen slightly reduced prices on an offer, but when I say slightly, I mean 10 grand. You know what I mean? Like nothing like hugely significant. Like we were seeing like $30,000-$40,000 off a sales price in April plus a 3% concession. I mean, you're not seeing that right now.
Yeah, and it's relative. In our market, your 10 grand might be equivalent to a 5 grand reduction in our market. But same thing that we're seeing here. And we're still seeing properties go into multiple offers if they're priced competitively and they're in, an average sale price market. It's not the luxury, but it's not the super fixer upper. Properties are going quite quickly there. And, in talking with some of my buyers, they're concerned, like, well, should we wait? If the Fed's going to lower interest, in December again, should we wait? It's like, well, the longer you wait, theoretically, if somebody got into under contract right now and the Fed lowers rates, like they might be able to realize that when they go to close on a loan if you don't lock in. So it's really is an opportune time, in my opinion, too.
Yeah, and people, and it's a hard line I walk with first-time home buyers. It really is. Like, and to be really candid, I've only had one first-time home buyer this entire year actually buy. Everybody I've worked with that has actually bought has been repeat or an investor, right? Because it's expensive to get in and there's a lot of hesitation. And I understand wanting to get a good deal. I really do. But to your point, if you're holding this house for 10 years, you're probably going to make money on it. You're probably going to have equity in it, right? And you even see that from 2010 to 2020 and even 2000 to 2010 during the Great Recession, people were positive. Predominantly, the housing market was positive as an overall. And I get wanting to get a good deal, but sometimes I think people focus a little bit too much on the deal if they're a home buyer, not an investor. This is different. But if you're a home buyer, focusing too much on the deal and not enough about what you actually want, like where do you want to live? Like you want to stay in this house for 6 or 10 years. So like, let's not just get a good deal on an area you don't want, on a smaller house than you need, all these different things. It's like they're so focused that they almost lose the vision of like, you're going to be living here. Like this is part of you for you to enjoy living here.
Well, and I think buyers, when they get something in their head, or sellers likewise, and you get these deals that are hung up over, let's just say $2,000, because I've seen it on a, let's say $200,000 house. The difference that payment, from 198,000 to 200,000 is literally like $5 a month. So are you really want to lose a house over $5,000 a month? Like, yes, or $5 a month. Yes, it is different and it's still money at the end of the day. But if you're looking at your long-term goals, that's really what's the most important.
But I even think too, I mean, I even challenge my buyers over like 50,000, right? Because like I have a couple buyers right now, they're in a $350,000 price point, which in Arizona is not that much for a house. And I'm trying to get them to move up to a $400,000 price point because you can get a house that instead of a total fixer upper with a zillion issues, 400 in the area they're looking will get you a pretty decent starter home. And you have to think you have two people working, $50,000 extra. It's not that much in the payment. Like it's $100 and some each if you're thinking about on it each, per diem to get the house that you actually want to live in. And that's kind of the struggle they're having because they're very focused on the sales price. We only wanted to spend $350,000. And I really do understand that. And I'm quite a budgeter and I get it. But you also have to think is like, what house do you want? And do you want a total fixer-upper? Like, there's a lot more work. There arguably could be $50,000 in work in this fixer-upper that, you may or may not do. But, it's one of those things where people focus on the total. And I don't want to tell people not to do that, but you really also need to focus on the payment because this is a long-term investment. This is not like, you're paying this off in 2 years, you know, and over time, what happens is inflation, you make more money. You're going to continue to make more money. Most people are not going to make less money. So these payments, you know, like, okay, $300 more a month between two people might seem like, okay, that's a decent amount now. But in 5 years, when you're both making more money, it's not. But in 5 years, when you're living in the house that you really don't want, what do you want to do? You want to move. So then you got to sell the house, hopefully make some money, buy another house. You know, it's just like a whole process, right? And so just get the house you want to stay in. The people that are happiest are the people that get the house they're going to want to be in for at least 6 years.
Yeah, I agree. And when you say, you know, $50,000 more on a house versus buying one that's less and spending $50,000 on repairs, you know, a lot of people can afford the payment difference, but they don't have $50,000 laying around to do the work. So
Correct.
that's also a factor too, where it's like you have to think ahead for those things and what needs to be done, and maybe stretching your budget just a little bit to find the right thing. You know, in some instances, that's the best choice.
Yeah, especially if you can afford it. You know, you know, these people can afford it. You know, they're actually pre-qualified for up to like $550, but they have. But if you're like, I can only afford this much and I can't afford an additional, then you should not do that. But if it's more just, this is what we want to spend and we're not going to budge even if we could afford more because we just have this number in mind, then you might end up getting something that you don't want. Yeah.
Or you sacrifice on location or something else where it's like, then you're going to move.
Yeah, right. People, if you're living in an area you don't want to be in, regardless of whatever reason that is the number one reason people move. You know what I mean? Like they don't like the area. And then, you know, because when you do sell a house in 2 or 3 or 4 years, you may lose money on it. And a lot of the payments you made just went to interest in those first few years. So it's really not smart to try to, you know, be moving every couple of years. That's not a good game plan.
No, not at all.
So let's
talk. A couple of things.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead. I was just going to say, there's a lot of things that people are getting wrong when it comes. And one of them is just focusing on the rate headlines versus solving for your monthly payment. You know, so rate is important, like we talked about, but what can you personally afford, which is super important.
And that's important too. And I also think people get caught up in the rates too, because depending on how big your loan is, a 1% difference in a rate is not that much money. I mean, depending on your loan, it could be a couple $100, right? And, you know, is it worth waiting, you know, 6 months to get a 1% or a year to get a 1% difference in a rate that would have saved you a couple $100 a month when you can totally just refinance? You know, people kind of have this illusion that, oh, if rates go from 6 to 5, I'm going to save like 25% of my payment, you know, and that's just not how it works. So you really have to understand the numbers. And I always, when I work with my clients, like I sit down and I go through with them the difference in the different rates because it's not as significant as you might think.
Yeah. And when you're working with a good lender or a good realtor, they're going to be able to sit you down and say, okay, if you buy this house now and rates do drop in a year from now, let's say they drop 1%, like you said, they're going to be able to do a projection on, okay, here's your cost to refinance. If you stay in the house for 18 more months or 24 more months, that's how long it's going to take you to recoup those sunken costs of refinancing. So if you know that's your forever house, go for it, go refinance. But otherwise, maybe the math doesn't math, but working with a good lender and a good realtor will tell you that.
Yeah, it'll really help you out. And, you know, the thing that first-time buyers are trying to do right now, which it's predominantly them, is they're trying to time the market. And the truth is when you're trying to time something, you actually aren't going to know when the bottom is. And so, you know, a big part of me thinks that the bottom was earlier this year. And since then, at least in my markets, it's been getting steadier. It's been going up a little bit. And my question to a buyer would be, how do you know what the market's doing? Like, are you actually tracking it? Are you watching YouTube videos that say it's crashing? Are you reading articles that say it's crashing? Because that's not really following your market. I think the best way to follow a market is and to truly understand it is figure out where you want to live and then really look at what is selling. Like save homes that you are interested in and see how many days that they're on the market and do that with, you know, 30 homes and you're going to have a good idea of your market. And like, if things are sitting, if they're going under contract, what makes them go under contract. Like if you're just going to watch YouTube videos that tell you it's going to crash, people will tell you the market is going to crash for 20 years until it does, right? Like that's just how it works. And then they're going to say they were right. But at the end of the day, the dynamics are not necessarily there to make the market crash.
Yeah, and I totally agree. When you see a price drop on a property, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a good deal. A
Yep.
price drop is, oh, let's take a second look. And sometimes it is a good deal where maybe it was priced just a little bit too high and now it's in line with what it's worth. But just because a property does a price drop doesn't mean it's like, oh, maybe we should go buy it. They just dropped it 10 or 20 grand. It's like, it could still be 30 grand overpriced. So it
And
really depends.
people can list for whatever they want. Like we went a couple weekends ago and looked at some condos, with a client. I took my niece with me, and my niece asked, she's 13. She goes, Auntie, why are some of these ones that was like the most expensive was not the nicest one, and they're all in the same building, right? And I'm like, because people can list it for whatever they want. Like, people can literally list it for whatever. So just because something's expensive and the price drops does not mean it's a good deal. Just because prices are dropping on certain, locations doesn't mean the market's crashing. If it's priced right, it will sell in this market. There are buyers. In a market that crashes, there are no buyers. The buyers are not interested. They cannot get lending. They cannot afford it. There are absolutely buyers right now. They are being more picky because there are more of them there are more sellers than buyers right now. So it gives the buyer opportunity to breathe and think and make a good offer. But that does not mean that nobody wants these houses. Trust me, if a house is priced correctly, it will sell.
100%. And I think that if I had to guess, the seller that overpriced their property was maybe an older seller, because that's the way things used to work. Like, yeah, we're going to list it at 300 because we want it to sell at 250. Well, with all of the pricing and algorithms and the information that we have at our fingertips these days, you can't do that. If you're thinking of selling a house, and I think we could do a whole show on this, but if you're thinking of selling a house, you really want to price it right, because that's when the most eyeballs get on your listings.
Absolutely. And something interesting is, and I think this is what happened to the people in April, which is why the market was so good for buyers then, is sellers were buying a house and then listing their house. So, and that is not normal. That started to happen during COVID because houses were selling so quickly that you kind of had to, because if you sold yours in 3 days and then you didn't have anywhere to live, like you needed to go buy something, right? And it was going to be hard to get your offer accepted. It was like hard to buy, easy to sell, right? And that is not traditionally how it works. So in April, people kind of missed the memo, right? So a lot of people bought something, vacated their house, and all of their showings were vacant. And then those people are more motivated because now they have two payments, right? Where now buyers or a lot of sellers understand that the market's slower. So they're doing what they traditionally do, and you're seeing houses go under as contingent, and they're waiting to sell their house before they actually close and buy a house. And so now a lot of my showings, I don't know about yours, they're not vacant. We have to work around tenants and we have to work around property owners. And because of that, that is a key thing too, is like it was just this weird market for a while, but it's going back to how it always was.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because what we've seen is increase of, I call it reverse contingency. So instead of a buyer making an offer having it be contingent on the sale of their home, sellers will list their home and get it sold or under contract, but it's contingent on them finding another house. So then they can be more competitive with their purchase, because it's like, hey, it's contingent on us selling our house, but it's already under contract. They've been pre-approved. We're through the inspection. It's just more of a formality than anything. So that reverse contingency, we've been seeing that a little bit more in our area too.
Yeah. And so I think that you just can't get caught up in the headlines, because I think that I do believe if you're sit on the sidelines, let's say 5 years from now, you're going to wish that you would have got into the market earlier. Now, I don't know if we'll have the crazy price hikes that we had from like 2020 till now, but it'll still increase, right? And it's going to be harder to get in the market. You might have more buyers. It might be a more even market. And then if they do come out with a product like a 50-year mortgage, or they do decrease interest rates, like anything like that is going to make the market start to really move again. And as a buyer, you're in a much better position to buy when the market is not moving super quickly.
Yeah, and I think that's the hard part about in real estate. If you wait for a perfect time, you might be waiting forever. I know that on the investor side, it's good to be patient if that's your game and not just buy something for the sake of buying something. And same time, if you're a first-time home buyer, you don't want to just buy something because you need a house. But there's all of these moving pieces in real estate, and it rarely feels like now is the perfect time. Like it never feels like totally perfect. But if all of the things that we've talked about are aligning and it's right fit, right place, fits your budget, and is a home that you can grow into or that you envision being there for a long time, then get off the sideline. I really do believe that it is a good time in general, taking out all the individual things. It is a good time in general to get off the sideline and get in the game.
Absolutely. And what's crazy is like, I just see it so clearly with investors. Like when I work with investors, it's all so clear to me. So like this woman, she was buying it for her this condo for her home, right? And but she is an investor, so she negotiates like an investor. So we found the nicest one. It was off market. He had wanted it as a rental. I called, see if he would be interested in selling it. He was. The price he gave us was way lower than any of the other condos, and his was the nicest. Okay. So already we're winning. But then she's like, I want to see if you can get this thing under $1 million. And it was listed for 1.1, right? So I get him down all the way to $1.010 million. So I saved her $90,000. Okay. And we figured out a deal. She didn't wait for the market to go down 10%. She negotiated a deal where she got almost 10% off of a property that was already listed under by a few $100,000 its counterparts that were not as nice. Okay. So she's not waiting till the market goes down. She knows right now she has negotiating power as a buyer, and she negotiated that 10% discount with my help, right? Like she's not sitting there like, well, Danille, I really want to buy, but actually I kind of want to see what the market does. I just want to see. I'm just going to wait and just see if these go down. No, we went, we saw them, we made an offer, we negotiated hard, and we got her a good deal. Okay. So that's the difference, right? So if you do want to buy, like you have negotiating powder. I'm not saying you're going to get 10% off, but what I'm saying is you can negotiate and see what kind of deal you want. If you say, in a market, I want to get my first single family home for $500,000 and a bunch of them are listed at $550,000. If you look at enough and you make enough offers, somebody's going to take your offer. So don't wait. Why are you waiting? Why? Because it might go down more. Well, maybe we had to but yeah, we got 10% off, but what if it goes down like another 10%? Like, who cares? Like, you can't time this, right? What if it goes up 10%? Now to get that same price, you need them to drop it 20%. Like, this isn't a short-term gain. This isn't what is the market going to do in a year. This is what's the market going to do in 10 years. Where are you going to be in 10 years? And if you just sit there, you're just going to be renting and waiting till you can maybe get in the market and praying for another, 08 to happen.
Yeah, and I think, people always mention 08 because that's, the big buzzword. Well, what about 2008? That's going to happen again. And it's really like, no, there was fundamental lending issues at that time. And the practices since then have been so tightened up, and we're not in any market conditions that even remotely resemble 2008. I know one can make an argument for that, but we're just not. We're not seeing that at all. The inventory is extremely low. Lending practices are tight. And most of the people that bought houses in the last 5 years are locked into a mortgage, less than 4%. So everything's sticky.
Yeah. Yeah. And really, I think what this comes down to is, if you think you're making a good decision by waiting and just waiting and just waiting, that's not really a decision. You don't know what to do. You're confused. You're afraid. A good decision, you really have to understand your market. So either talk to a realtor that you're going to trust that understands your market, or if you're not going to trust anybody, then what you need to do is you need to collect your own data. You need to be saving homes. Like I go on the MLS every single day, because currently I'm going to be looking for a home next year. I already know I'm doing a 1031. I'm saving homes every single day that I'm interested in. I'm watching them sell. I'm watching them go pending. I'm watching the ones that are too expensive because they might end up lowering their prices. Like, I'm watching all of it. Like, I really understand this little zip code, this little area that I want to be in. So that's what you need to be doing. That doesn't mean hopping on the MLS once a month and kind of seeing what's going on. No, this is a job for you. If you're not going to trust anybody, then you need to do the work yourself and really understand what's happening in your market, because there's markets that are way hotter than Phoenix and there's markets that are way slower than Phoenix, and you're not going to know. And different pockets in Phoenix are all selling at different rates. So you're not going to know until you understand exactly where you want to buy.
And I think, to your point of knowing what they're listed at is one thing, but then going back and reverting to what did they actually close at? Because you can look at list price and that's a good indicator, but that doesn't always translate into close price. So what did it actually sell for? Was there any seller pays? Looking at the details and the data, because most of us get a notification when there's a new listing, but we're not following up and then going back to that same data to say, okay, what did it actually sell for? Which is an important piece.
Exactly. And Josh just said they just purchased a place in Pensacola and there's no competition. And that's kind of what I'm seeing too. The reason that my buyer got such a good deal on this condo is because even though it wasn't listed yet, the other 4 that were listed had been sitting. And because of that, we were able to come in, let them know those have been sitting, and get a great deal on it. And, you can't be afraid of that, because at the end of the day, if you're going to keep the property, it's going to go up in value. I guarantee when it goes up, $100,000 in value in the next X amount of years, you're not going to look back and be like, oh man, I paid $20,000 too much for that. If I would have waited, 7 more months, it would have went down to the lowest point and then I would have got it for 20 grand cheaper. You can't, that doesn't make any sense, And like you said, everyone's so afraid of '08 happening again. And I'm not going to say it could never happen again, but the fundamentals for it to happen again are just not there. You're not seeing a lot of distress in the seller market. You're seeing more distress in the buyers that can't afford to buy, but not really in the sellers, And a lot of your buyers right now are boomers, are the number one buyer right now. Certainly people over 40. And, I know that's because it's so expensive to buy, and I'm not trying to discount that. But what I'm discounting, the people that can afford to buy, because I see them all the time, and they just cannot commit because they are just so confused, and it's like analysis paralysis.
Yes. Yeah. And I think even going back to '08, where things in Arizona totally tanked. And so you get down to this, the bottom, and my dad and my grandpa both bought. It wasn't at the bottom, it was on its way up, and they're like, well, we missed the bottom, should we buy? Maybe it'll go down again. But they both bought, and now in the last 2 years, which they held those properties, they both sold in the last 2 years and more than doubled their money. So if they would have had that analysis paralysis to be like, oh shoot, we missed the bottom, maybe it'll go down again, well then look where they would be. They wouldn't have had this nice, I say, bonus of gaining on that appreciation. And they had tenants in there the whole time. So they literally put down the down payment and had tenants paying their mortgages.
Well, and the other thing is that when it does hit the bottom, don't think you can just buy either, because, when 2010, no banks are lending, nobody can get a loan. If you were, let go of your job, you had to be there for a year. The banks tighten so much that just because you can get a loan right now, if we were to go through that again, does not mean that you can get a loan then. And that was the problem, really. It's not that people didn't want to buy in 2010. A lot of people wanted to buy a house in Phoenix for $175,000. The problem is the banks were really almost solidly taking cash unless you were in a really good financial position. And that's why Ken got stuck in a condo project, because they were selling condos and because they were converting them. And then at the end of the day, they had an issue because nobody could get a loan to buy the condo. It's not that people didn't want the condo. That's what people don't understand. Yep. It's not like everyone was like, oh, we don't want to buy. They couldn't buy. So right now, if you can buy and you think we're going to go into a recession and you think you might lose your job, as long as you think you can get another job, then it's still an okay time to buy, because once you lose your job, now you're considered more of a liability and it's harder to get lending from the bank.
Yeah, exactly. And so for buying right now, it really does make sense for like if you've been a long-term tenant somewhere, paid a lot of rent and you're going to be in a place somewhere, then maybe it does make sense to buy. Another one is if you've held your job for, a number of years and that that's the job that you like and that's, what you want to do, then buy or really think seriously about flipping from being a renter to home ownership because that's, number one wealth builder in the US is home ownership.
Totally. And if you think rents right now are low because they've went down. I shouldn't say they're inexpensive, but they've went down from their peak. And the reason for that is all this building. But rents are going to slowly creep back up as less and less building is happening of these new units. So it would be nice to get into a fixed rate product where you know what your payment is, no matter how much money you make, no matter what inflation does, like this is your payment. And, you know, that is the beauty of real estate. And it's one of the, those 30-year fixed mortgages, the U.S. is one of the only places that have them, right? And so, I always try to tell people, like, I know it is scary buying a house. It really is. And I remember feeling like that. But at the end of the day, like, I rarely run into somebody that regrets it. Like, it's very, very rare that I run into someone that regrets it. And I never run into people that talk about, oh, I wish I would have, I wish I would have waited to buy. You know what I mean? Like, it's like everyone's always like, they're happy that they're in their home. They're happy they bought.
Yeah, for sure. And there's on the flip side of everybody being happy that they bought, there maybe are a few people that should consider waiting. So we'll talk about that too. If you're really, really stretching to qualify to be in a decent neighborhood, if you've started a new job and you're not sure if you like it yet, there are instances where it's like, okay, hit the brakes, hit pause, and just take your time to decide if you really want to be there or not.
Yeah, if you really don't like where you can afford to buy, then you should wait. Like, if you're looking and you're like, this is stretching me too much. I don't want to live in this neighborhood. I don't want to live in this area. I don't want a 3-bedroom house. I want a 4, and you just can't afford it, then that's a whole other thing. But then there's a strategy around that. But yes, you shouldn't just buy something just to get in if you don't like what you can afford.
Yeah, I mean, if your budget's, X amount a month and you're buying a house that has spiders or mice in it or something like that,
exactly.
Yeah, it's probably best to wait. Or, wait till you have a rainy day fund too, because once you're a homeowner, you don't know if your furnace is going to go out or your AC is going to need some service, different things like that. So you do want a rainy day account set up too. That's just there for certain incidentals. But, work towards that then. Set your goals and, save X amount a month or put, so much aside for that so you can then attain your goal when you are ready to make that purchase.
Yeah. And I mean, the biggest thing is, working with a good realtor on all of this, a good realtor and a good lender. And you really want to work with someone that really understands the market that you're in. And you should ask a lot of questions before you hire a realtor, and you should even interview more than one if you don't feel comfortable. But you're making that commitment to the realtor. So you want to make sure that they're looking out in your best interest.
Yeah. And on the flip side of it, I always tell my clients, hey, yes, with a buyer's representation contract, you're committing to me, but at the same time, I'm committing to you too. Where it's like if something hits the market and you're a client, I'm going to call you versus, some random Zillow lead that I got from, 3 weeks ago or whatever. Your clients, a realtor's clients get the best attention, communication, priority over some random, leads or email inquiries that come in. So it is a mutual promise. I know it does seem kind of scary as a consumer to, sign a representation contract with an agent, but interviewing them and understanding that it is a mutual decision to enter in. And I've had to let a client go. I'll be like, we're not the best fit, and so it does kind of go both ways.
It totally does. And I think the number one is really understanding the market. Unless you do, you need somebody to. So if you really understand it, then that's fine. But your realtor needs to be able to negotiate. Like, a lot of realtors I work with cannot negotiate. And it's probably the number one, especially in this market when there's deals to be had. You want somebody that is not afraid to go out on a limb and try to get you a deal.
Yep, absolutely. That's number one skill.
Yeah, right? Like, not everyone's comfortable doing that. Trust me, I have been on both sides. So it pays to negotiate. It pays to work with someone that can negotiate.
Yeah. So. I actually had one of my clients say that. They're like, we appreciate working with you because you don't tell us, no, that's too low, offer more. I always say a seller can't say no to an offer they don't have in hand.
Yep.
And my clients have gotten some really great deals because of it. It's like, okay, maybe they didn't accept the first lowball offer, but they came down a lot more than what we thought they would have. So it does pay off.
Well, and that's what I said to my client this last weekend. I said, I think I can get this under $1 million. She goes, you think so? I go, I don't know. I go, I think that's where we should start. And she goes, okay, if you want to do that. And I said, yeah, let's do it. And we got it at $1,010,000. And I said, well, I got it at $1,010,000. She goes, 10 grand. She was thrilled. She was, because she thought, because he had come in at his price at 1.1, so like low compared to the other ones, that was like best and final. And I'm like, it's not best and final till they say it's best and final, in my opinion.
Yep, absolutely.
So no, it's fun. I actually have fun with it. Negotiating something I enjoy, but I would say most realtors that I've come across, very few can negotiate because it can be uncomfortable. And there's this, sometimes, the seller does get upset at a low offer. But here's the thing, even if a seller gets upset at a low offer, they're still going to take a better one. So like, they're not going to say, oh, we don't want to hear from you anymore. Not in this market. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So to me, it's always like go in low, see what you can get, and then decide if you want to go in higher if they reject it.
Yeah. At the end of the day, it's really not a bad time to buy. Yes, there's a lot of confusion in the market and all of these headlines that can be distracting, clickbait. But at the end of the day, you got to look at everything at the table in your market, talk to a good agent, and yeah.
Awesome. Well, we will see you guys next week.